you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this Road to Recovery video. Visit their website to learn how the Grizzly Drive drum motor increases the reliability and reduces the cost of ownership of conveyor systems.
Well, David, since you brought that idea up of what is infrastructure, it's a talking point I've been having of late with readers, with manufacturers, dealers. Just this idea, historically, in our country, we're talking about roads, bridges, airports, ports, aggregate-intensive construction materials involved. But that conversation here in 2021 has become something totally new, something I probably would have thought of just a few years ago. But here we are, and even in Washington, I think the idea, they're calling it human infrastructure, and it's competing against this traditional historic infrastructure, the aggregate-intensive stuff that pit and quarry readers, that aggregate producers rely on. And it seems like this is part of the new world order, I suppose, when it comes to infrastructure. You and I were talking offline beforehand just about, is this a threat of sorts, potentially, if you're an aggregate producer, when it comes to competing for dollars in future future highway bills, future infrastructure bills? What do you think? I mean, is this a threat here now that infrastructure's definition is broadening?
Well, let's discuss it in two parts. First, infrastructure. And as you've just said, we had the traditional view of infrastructure. Well, infrastructure is popular. So politicians, being politicians, say, well, why don't we just add on to that and call it human infrastructure? Now, it's a totally legitimate thing. We've always talked about education as investing in the future. And investing in the future is like an infrastructure, human infrastructure. But even education is different than it used to be. Education is only a proxy for you gaining skills. That is, for the last 100 years. Somebody goes to school, they graduate, it's assumed they have a bunch of skills, they can get a much higher pay. That's not true today. Now it matters what the major was. And so I suspect if you come out with a chemical engineering degree, yes, you'll get a pretty high wage compared to before. You come out with a gender studies degree, not so much. So we ought to talk about skills enhancement. Not so much a degree, but skills enhancement, because believe me, electricians can make a lot of money and they have a skill. So human infrastructure, fine. But because the word infrastructure is popular, you just keep tagging onto that. Everything, right? Early daycare and everything else that you can imagine that you want to do, call it human infrastructure. So in the near term, it's a threat. Okay. Longer term, well, maybe the infrastructure aggregates community and the building community can start tagging on to human infrastructure bills. So bills that were put forward as just human infrastructure, we say, well, why don't we throw in a little traditional infrastructure also? So it could be that we can start piggybacking on human infrastructure bills. This time they're piggybacking on a construction infrastructure, but it could go the other way.
Thank you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this Road to Recovery video. Visit their website to learn how the Grizzly Drive drum motor increases the reliability and reduces the cost of ownership of conveyor systems.